past the clouds, over the dark night. She reached up to the sky of stars and caught the red-hot light of the North Star. Opened the earth, walking with blood-soaked feet. She challenged the whip, the gun, the knife. She challenged the fire, pulled from the bodies of slaves, made into laws, prisons, and courts. Screaming white-hot flames and agony, she challenged millions of headhunters, dragging and ripping apart impossible tender moments of time, shipping vessels of history, ancient history, destroying the fabric, the godlike claw of destiny, of a people, with a gun, a knife, a cannon, building the hideous wall of blood called slavery.
Good afternoon and welcome back as always. Well, here's the breaking news. White smoke was seen coming from the chimney at the Vatican. The bells are ringing. That means the Cardinals have elected a new Pope, American Robert Prevost from Chicago. Now Pope Leo XIV is the new Pope. He is the first American to lead the Catholic Church. The question is, of course, will he be as progressive as far as the church is concerned as Pope Francis, who both they were very good friends from what I understand. And another question that I think is really important is, will they start to serve deep dish Chicago style pizza at the Vatican? Time will tell. Now to the business of the day. Over the past few days, my guest and I have been discussing Burkina Faso and its president, Ibrahim Traoré. What's happening with other African countries in the wake of the new developments in Burkina Faso and other countries of color? Let's connect some dots and find out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.
Welcome to the Connecting the Dots podcast with Dr. Wilmer Leon, and I am Wilmer Leon. Here's the point. We have a tendency to view current events as though they occur in a vacuum, failing to understand the broader historical context in which most events take place. During each episode, my guests and I have probing, provocative, and in-depth discussions that connect the dots between these events and the broader historic context in which they occur, thus enabling you to better understand and analyze the events that are impacting the global village in which we live. On today's episode, the issue before us is as the African Report tells us, as insurgency intensifies and civic space shrinks in the West African state of Burkina Faso, a different kind of battle is unfolding online where AI-generated images, deep fake anthems, and algorithmic fervor have turned the young military leader into a digital messiah. What does all of this mean? What's the extent of his impact on other nations, and how concerned is the West? My guest is a lifelong activist. He's the former chair of the Africana Studies Department at Ohio University, former head of the King Center in Atlanta, and former station manager at WPFW 89.3 FM in Washington, D.C., and former host of the phenomenal, the brilliant show, Morning Conversations with Tom Porter. He is Tom Porter. And as always, Tom, welcome back.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
As always, Tom, thanks for joining me. So Tom, the face of Captain Ibrahim, now President Ibrahim Traoré, has been beaming across social media feeds throughout West Africa, and from posters and placards hoisted in the streets of Burkina Faso's capital, Ouagadougou, and London and beyond, his images appear in various forms. Sometimes he seems stoic in military fatigues. Other times, draped in Pan-African flags or depicted as a divine warrior glowing with celestial light. Tom, he has seemingly come out of nowhere to already achieve icon status. Your thoughts on where we are right now with President Ibrahim Traoré?
You know,
now, if you could tilt your camera down a little bit.
Let me.
Oh, that's great. Perfect. There you go. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for having me. You know, as I said in our previous conversation, that significant changes are taking place on the African continent. Mm-hmm. And there's scant discussions in the West, even on such radical programs as Democracy Now! You don't, I mean, it's almost if it's not happening. And this is one of the most significant, what is happening on the continent of Africa is perhaps the most significant changes on the continent of Africa since the time of Nkrumah, Amilcar Cabral, Eduardo Mondlane, Patrice Lumumba. This brother who really didn't come out of nowhere, but because very little is covered in this country about what's happening in on the continent of Africa, and especially when there are changes that are going on. I mean, this brother has sparked a revolution, not just in Africa, but in the Caribbean, where leaders are speaking out. In the USA, that he has sparked a conversation and admiration from people who would not normally be involved in discussions about Africa. I mean, he's igniting a Pan-African revolution. He's encouraged, I mean, just as Gil Scott-Heron would say, just one wants freedom, then another wants freedom, then the whole world wants freedom. It seems like a revolution has broken out all over on the continent of Africa. Ghana bans foreign gold traders. Botswana accelerates development. Namibia asserts control over oil and gas, and Tanzania curbs dollar dominance, following his blueprint. And this is not all. And it is amazing. And as a good friend of mine would say, it's a great day to be alive.
You know, you mentioned Democracy Now! And not to pick on anybody, but the truth is the light. Democracy Now! In the minds of many is this incredibly progressive left program, but they don't seem to be leading left. They seem to be following left, if that makes sense. So does this say anything to you? or what should people take away? Let me put it another way. What should people take away from the fact that this is not the leading story with Amy Goodman and Democracy Now?
Well, I think it obviously represents a blind spot on her part.
Well, wait a minute. Let me ask you to address the first point I made, that a lot of people see her as leading left, but she really, in a lot of instances, is following left.
Okay, I buy that, but the question of Africa has been and is a fundamental problem for the West, even for the left.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Africa has been seen as a dependent continent, and the West has done, particularly the left, through what I want to call them, NGOs and what have you, feel that they have been helping Africa. But what is fundamental to what's happening right now is that the West, in particular, for hundreds of years, has developed at the expense not only of Africa, but has developed because of raping the resources of Africa, not just the natural resources, but the human resources as well. Slavery. I mean, it's interesting that today Trump and I can't think of his name, Starmer, is that his name?
Yes, Keir Starmer in Germany.
And made a deal. Now, Starmer is supposed to be leader of the left in the UK, the Labour Party. And Trump is known as a fascist. So what do they have in common? They have a common history of colonialism and neocolonialism,
mm-hmm.
of raping the continent of Africa. And this move led by Captain Traore has the West shaking in their boots, because he is leading a movement of revolution which is designed for Africa to become not only self-sufficient and independent as a continent, but also to become a significant player on the world stage. A united Africa with its own currency would be in the same league with China and Russia. And if you don't think that France, the United States, Britain, Germany, they never saw this coming. They never saw this coming, that it would rise up and lead a revolution on the continent of Africa. So not my concern, I know why it's not covered here,
mm-hmm.
but the reason why I wanted to talk about it, because we need to talk about
it. A lot of people observing what's transpiring there would say, well, wait a minute, this is a coup on a continent that has coups every other day. But I think what people need to pay attention to is who's behind the coup. And this is an instance where this isn't a U.S.-backed play. This is an anti-imperialist play, which means it's going in a whole nother direction.
This is a revolution. This revolution means fundamental change.
Mm-hmm.
This is not Africa asking for more money from the IMF, the World Bank. This is not Africa that wants to depend on the West for resources which they have, which go to the West and then they buy back.
Mm-hmm.
So make no mistake that the reason why there's silence on this issue even with people like Amy Goodman, who you would think, I mean, I think it's admirable that every day she gives a disproportionate amount of time to Palestine.
Mm-hmm.
That is a significant issue,
Mm-hmm.
that she gives a disproportionate amount of time to the individuals who are being locked up unceremoniously and illegally in this country. But in the broader scheme of things, that an independent, free Africa would be a place that could aid the Palestinians. An independent Africa would stop what is going on in Sudan.
Mm-hmm.
Because Traore is just not talking about a revolution in terms of independence, but he's also talking about an Africa who can defend itself. And Africa united could say to Sudan, now that you cats either give it up or you're gonna have to give it up. And Africa as a nation would be, again, as I said, as a nation, as a continent that is united socially, culturally, economically, and politically, with its own currency, with the resources of Africa,
Mm-hmm.
which the West has used to develop themselves at the expense of the de-development of Africa. There's no reason for anybody to be hungry in Africa, but you will be hungry if you're convinced to quit growing rice and import it when you were a net producer of rice, not only for yourself, but for the countries around you. So I think it's something that we need to talk about. I think it's something, as they say, we're in the belly of the beast. I think it's something that we should not only be concerned about, but we should support it.
Raven Allen, thank you very much for that super sticker. To have power in the U.S., we need to develop power in Africa. That means being part of their development. And Tom, that takes me to, I can't remember the senator when General Michael Langley was testifying before the Senate, and one of the senators said that he was perplexed at how Africa hasn't developed further. And then you've got Emmanuel Macron saying something as equally idiotic. They're sitting there scratching their heads as though they know nothing about colonialism. They know nothing about neocolonialism. They know nothing about imperialism and how the West has intentionally, to what Traore says, how the West has just intentionally used them and previous and current African leaders to serve their interests. They say that as though they have no clue. It's a mystery to them. How? Go ahead.
They're hoping that we don't have a clue. As Harriet Tubman said, she could have freed thousands more if only they knew they were slaves. So what is good about this, and what is one of the unintended consequences of Stinky in the White House, is that he has awakened Black communities all over the world. I mean, I've heard statements from the head of Barbados, from Trinidad. I mean, the conversation in the Black community has changed. And the brother who said the statement about Africa is the motherland. It is the connecting link. I mean, of Africans all over the planet. And Pan-Africanism has been something that's been alive, but unfortunately, in this country in particular, nationalism has been the preferred ideological thrust and not Pan-Africanism, because Pan-Africanism means the unity of African people throughout the diaspora. It means that it means that reparations is an international phenomena, not some city in Illinois or some community in Brooklyn. It means that we have to take our struggle to the world stage. And he's leading the way. He's taken the place of Sankara, but of Amilcar Cabral, of all of the revolutionaries in the 60s who were assassinated by the West. And but it's a different time. It is a different time. It is an awake Black population across the globe. And the fact that we're seeing this, the fact that we're watching it, makes it difficult for them to pull off an assassination and get away with it, because we are alert.
So we've had then Vice President Harris go to CARICOM and try to get CARICOM to back the play of the U.S. in Haiti. We had Hakeem Jeffries follow her down there. We know that Gregory Meeks is a staunch Zionist. So does Traore and the other leaders, does this now put them as members of the Congressional Black Caucus, put them on Front Street?
Does it put the members of the Black Caucus on Front Street?
Yes.
All the way on the front row. I mean, they're bought and paid for. It's very few of them that haven't taken the money from AIPAC and other right-wing donors. So, but they don't really matter anymore. That's the beautiful thing about it. If you're not relevant, you don't matter. And so nobody talks about the Black Caucus anymore, except the members of the Black Caucus that are progressive and speak out on issues. Nobody talks about. I can't tell you what they do. I mean,
you can't even say they throw a good party now. You can't even say that.
No, they don't even have the jazz concert anymore.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
So we're in a different period of history. Some people like to say it's multilateralism against unilateralism. That's actually one aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
But when you have the continent, which has been the breadbasket of the world, and all of a sudden it says, well, I think I'd like to have this for myself. I think it would be good if our kids could go to school, free education. It would be good if we had our own currency. It would be good if we had our own united military force.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we had our own military force, instead of a country like Kenya sending troops to Haiti, we would have a united military force that could deal with the situation in Haiti, which has been obviously created directly and indirectly by the West, particularly France and the United States.
You know, I think you saw this clip it sent to us by a mutual friend. It was Jamal Bowman at a town hall, and a Palestinian woman stood up in the middle of his presentation, and she just went off on. She was asking Bowman, why are you? You authorized $6 billion to be sent to the Zionist colony of Israel to kill women and children. And Mel W., thank you for that super sticker. You've been and it was a room full of mostly African Americans, and they looked shook. And then a woman sitting behind this Palestinian woman said, "Be respectful." And the Palestinian sister turned and said, be respectful, be respectful. And this is, I'm using this to get to this point. She said, make this make sense. Make this make sense. And to me, that was one of the most powerful, incredibly truncated statements about the entire insanity that one could make. She said, make this make sense. And Jamal Bowman stood there, couldn't say a damn thing. And Tom, I think make it make sense makes sense.
You can't make it make sense because it doesn't make any sense. And I remember when Kamala Harris was running for president, and I got in debate after debate about how she had to establish and separate herself from the foreign policy of Joe Biden and Democrats. And the response was, well, Black people are not concerned about that. She can't do anything until she gets in. It'll be the first woman. And it was all of that. And the fact that she didn't distinguish herself from Biden, co-signed his policies and what have you. It wasn't just the fact that Trump won. It was more to do with the fact she discredited herself and was a poor representation of a Black woman and of a Black person.
Dr. Nick says Jamal wasn't able to pull a fire alarm. You're absolutely, Jamal, Nick, Dr. Nick, you're right. Because that might have been what he was looking for. He was standing looking around for, where's the fire alarm? I need to pull this thing to evacuate this room, because he was getting hammered. And again, make this make sense. That should be one of the leading chants now, because to your point, Tom, it doesn't. So we have now President Traore as a revolutionary anti-imperialist. He's cut ties with France. He's aligning more closely with Russia, vowing to restore sovereignty in a country plagued by insurgency that is paid for and organized by the West. Tom, in terms of the Russia alliance, when you see videos of the pro-Traore protests in Burkina Faso, there are a lot of Russian flags being waved there. What does this say to you?
Well, Russia has, to its credit, under the Soviet Union, they were supportive of the revolutionary and progressive movements in Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, China was on the wrong side.
Wait a minute, Tom. Spend a little bit of time unpacking that, because a lot of folks in our community, they seem to be totally oblivious to that history. I ask people, well, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, the Soviet Union was very, very supportive politically, economically, and militarily in the struggle in Southern Africa. And unfortunately, at that time, China was more nationalistic than it was internationalist, and supported the reactionary, Roland Roberto, Joseph Savimbi, and that crew. Unfortunately for them, between the support of the Soviet Union and the Cuban boots on the ground in Southern Africa, I mean, the changes in Southern Africa pushed the white Southerners, the white Boers in South Africa, to let Nelson Mandela out of jail, because as Che Guevara says, in the revolution, one wins or one dies. And they were on their way to moving on Pretoria and Johannesburg. And they let Nelson out basically to stop the revolution. Mm-hmm. And people were saying that I was in South Africa for the inauguration, and people were looking at Nelson. It was good for him to be out of jail, but they knew that they had achieved some political power, but the economic power and therefore the real political power remained in the hands of the apartheid regime.
I say to people all the time that as we get into this discussion about Russia's involvement in the continent, I ask them all the time, do you know where Patrice Lumumba University is? Do you know where Patrice Lumumba University? It's in Moscow. That should say something about.
In the meantime, Stinky, who's in the White House, is trying to destroy even the most insignificant as well as significant things about the history of blacks in the United States or in the world.
Oh, you know what? Thalia Cooks, thank you. You're right. I said it was Bowman. It was actually Raphael Warnock. I would thank you for that clarification. Thalia Cook. I think that's Cooks. That was Raphael Warnock. Right, not Jamal Bowman. Thank you.
Who pastors the church where Dr. King
yes.
used to pastor.
Thank you.
He also took money from AIPAC.
A lot.
Which Dr. King would never have done.
Thank you, Thalia. You're absolutely right for that correction. It was Raphael Warnock. And Jonathan Soul, thank you for that super sticker. Didn't China accept a delegation from the Black Panther Party in the 60s before Nixon? Now that's an answer I don't have.
That's a good possibility that they did. The Black Panther Party was more aligned ideologically with Maoism than it was with Leninism. So that's a possibility. And the same thing in terms of the North Koreans. And I mean, in many ways, we saw China as a non-white country and Korea as a non-white country. But we must always be ideologically and philosophically clear. And the importance is not whether we're Maoists or Leninists. The important thing is that we apply the scientific principles of socialism to our particular situation. And I've never been to China, but I was in the Soviet Union. I've been to Cuba. I've been to other places. And socialism is not one size that fits all. It has to be applied to the particular circumstances of a country or state, and it has to come out of the people. And so I had some friends who were Leninists, and there were people who were Maoists. And I mean, at one point you had people saying that they were Marxist, Leninists, and Krumaists. Then they were Marxist, Leninists, and Krumaists, Cabralists. And it's crazy because they took, and Krumah, Cabral, and all of them took what we call the science of society and applied it to the particular circumstances that they were dealing with.
I think I interrupted you. I don't know if you remember what the point you were going to make when I mentioned about where is Patrice Lumumba University. So if you want to go back,
well, I mentioned that in this country, whatever statues that or whatever signs of the progress that Black people have made, that this present administration is trying to eliminate them, and it doesn't seem to be a pushback on the part of our left allies to this. And that's the reason why I started off by saying I'm disappointed about the fact that Amy Goodman has not addressed this, has not spent a half hour on this. And but I'm also disappointed that even WPFW has not. This is so significant that there should be a day where a station like WPFW deals with what is going on the continent of Africa and throughout the African diaspora. I mean, it's good to do a day of James Brown. I like James Brown.
Mm-hmm.
And it's good to do a day of Malcolm X, but Malcolm must be connected to what's happening today. And he certainly is connected, but to have a day where we play his records and what have you, and not connect Malcolm to the ongoing struggle of African people throughout the African diaspora is a waste of time. And even Malcolm wouldn't listen to it.
In September 1971, the People's Republic of China welcomed a delegation from the Black Panther Party, led by Huey Newton and Elaine Brown and Robert Bay, for a 10-day visit. This occurred months before Nixon's historic visit in 1972. During their visit, the delegation was greeted by thousands of Chinese citizens waving Mao Zedong's Little Red Book and displaying signs supporting the Black Panther Party, denouncing U.S. imperialism. Newton met with Zhou Enlai and other officials and expressed admiration for China's socialist system, describing it as free and liberated territory. And I think that's important, and it shows the connection, because early in the days of the formation of the part of the Black Panther Party for self-defense, the Little Red Book was mandatory reading if you wanted to become a member of the Black Panther Party for self-defense. Tom Porter.
I mean, I had a Little Red Book. I had Gaddafi's Little Green Book, and they're good books. But when you listen to Nkrumah, Fanon, Cabral, and the list goes on, those are good books, but they're pamphlets.
Mm-hmm.
It is important, ideological struggle has to be preceded by ideological study. And there are 45 volumes.
Now, wait a minute. Why put it that way and not the reverse? Why doesn't you said struggle comes before study. Why doesn't study come before struggle? Or why does the study lead to struggle?
Well, the fact of it is, as LeBron Bennett once said, struggle is the highest form of education.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I said the question of ideology or philosophy should be studied simultaneously. But to call yourself a Maoist, what does that really mean?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Because Mao said he was a Marxist.
Mm-hmm.
So if we talk about, let's say, Pan-Africanism, what does Pan-Africanism mean? Well, there are people who use the phrase Pan-Africanism, and then there are people who lived it and developed it in struggle, like Du Bois, C.L.R. James,
mm-hmm.
Eric Williams. And these are all people, I guess, I'm a throwback, but in the midst of whatever we were doing in the 60s, we studied.
Mm-hmm.
We studied. We listened to Malcolm, but we read Che Guevara, we read Lenin, we read Nkrumah. So I'm saying, getting back to the Panthers were a part of the overall struggle that was going on
mm-hmm.
in the 60s. And they did a lot of great things. And that cannot be denied, but having gone to China, I went to the Soviet Union. I saw Lenin's tomb. I went to East Germany when it was a GDR. I spoke at a university there. But in the final analysis, the very principles of Marxism, and I don't like to use the word Marxism because Marx was not a Marxist, that was his name. But the application of scientific principle, understanding of dialectical and historical materialism is is very, very important. And I would encourage people to study those principles because they are the things that guide you in struggle. They inform your analysis and what have you.
In fact, let's do this. Lion Champion.
How are you helping Georgia?
Hang on. Thank you. Pause that for me, please. Thanks. Lion Champion. Thank you for that 5-pound super sticker. Russia supported Ethiopia in the Battle of Adwa with weapons which defeated Italy. You're absolutely right. Raven Allen, thank you for that super sticker. The developing power abroad in Africa is a reality. Developing power here in the States is a fantasy. Let me say that again. The developing power abroad in Africa is a reality. Developing power here in the States is a fantasy. Well, I'm, Raven, I can't debate that with you. The only thing, in saying I'm not going to say you're wrong, I'm just not as fatalistic because I see it as I see the struggle as an ongoing process. So I can't say you're wrong. I'm just saying I'm not that fatalistic because to me, if I concede that point, then instead of my sitting here talking to Tom, I should be playing golf. So Tom, that's my thought on that. What's your thought on that?
Well, I think I understand what he's saying, but then I don't. In Africa, the fight for state power, that is control of the state, is very, very real. But I'll tell you a story. Years ago, I was at a conference in what was then East Germany, or the German Democratic Republic. And one night while I was there, we were sitting around drinking beer and discussing stuff with members of Frelimo, PAIGC, MPLA. But these were all the combatants who were fighting the Portuguese at that time. They had not seized power. And from one of the groups said, if you all could do something in America, the rest would be child play. So we do have the possibility of power. We do have the ability to risk, to resist. And we've done these things before. If he means, could we seize state power in this country as Black people? I would say the answer is probably no. Mm-hmm. Could state power be seized in this country? It's not likely, but it could be. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what he means. Other than the fact I see there are many levels of power, mm-hmm. and there are many levels of struggle. There are some people say that political struggle, the problem is capitalism, so political struggle. But political struggle is a level or a phase or a stage in struggle. I don't know of any revolution that started off as a violent, as armed struggle. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting. I've traveled to a lot of places and met a lot of people who were militants. I met Fidel Castro. I met Yasser Arafat. And one of the things that I noticed about all of these people, they were not militant. They didn't sound militant. They didn't act militant. We talked about a lot of different things. And so I would simply say to him that there are different stages of power, there are different stages of struggle, and to suggest that if we can't seize state power, we're not part of the struggle or revolution for Pan-Africanism throughout the diaspora. I would say I disagree with him.
Let me say, Cherie writes, maybe, Dr. Wilmer, you can go to Mar-a-Lago $1 million dinners and go to his golf courses with cryptocurrencies and memes, dirty money laundering for the elites, and hidden drug money. Cherie, I'm not sure what that means, and I don't know if you understood my point or didn't. My point was this: that if someone says that African Americans developing power here in the States is a fantasy, that's what I'm referring to. If I concede that point, what the point I was trying to convey, if I concede that point, then I'm wasting my time with this show. I'm wasting my time right now talking to Tom. If developing power here is a fantasy, then I might as well stop trying to develop power in the African American community and spend my afternoon on the golf course, because playing golf is what I love to do. So that, and I don't mean playing golf at Mar-a-Lago or any it's not even really a good golf course. I mean, it's all right. But my point is, I'm not that fatalistic to accept developing power here in the States is a fantasy. I'm not going to concede that point. That's why I engage in what I engage in and do what I do and bring to you brilliant minds like Tom Porter. If that is the reality, if developing power here is a fantasy, then why are we having this conversation? That's the point. And Cherie, if I misunderstood your point, I apologize, and I know you will clarify and set me straight. So with that, let me say that at a recent Atlanta town hall, Senator Raphael Warnock faced intense criticism from pro-Palestinian protesters, including a woman who passionately challenged his vote against halting an $8.8 billion arms deal to Israel, highlighting tensions between his support for a ceasefire and his legislative actions. And let's go to this clip.
How are you helping Georgians? Explain yourself. $8.8 billion. You know how many children are slaughtered? Slaughtered every day.
Be respectful. Bombing children is okay, but you want us to be respectful. He sent $8.8 billion a month ago of weapons to Israel, but you want us to be respectful. Make it make sense. Make it make sense. Make it make sense. Make it make sense. They're slaughtering Palestinian children and innocent men and women.
If you can, run that back just a little bit, because I want the audience to look at the faces. I want this audience to look at the faces of the people in Warnock's audience, because they don't know what the flip to do. They are Tom, I could go a whole nother way with this, but I won't do it because I was raised better than that. Those people in Atlanta were shook, were clueless. They had nothing to say. If you run that back just a couple seconds, I want people to see the faces of, I was going to say something, but I won't, Tom, of those people in Atlanta.
Slaughtered every day.
Be respectful.
Look at this guy in the salmon-colored shirt.
But you want us to be respectful. He sent $8.8 billion a month ago of weapons to Israel, but you want us to be respectful.
That brother right there, he's saying,
make it make sense.
What am I sitting in the middle of?
Make it make sense. They're slaughtering Palestinian children and innocent men and women.
Look, well, and Tom, that's why the Democrats did not want to allow and would not allow a Palestinian voice to speak at the DNC. For that very reason, those folks in Atlanta, and I am not castigating everybody in Atlanta, but the folks sitting in that church were clueless. Clueless, Tom Porter.
Well, it reminds me when Dr. King connected the struggle in this country against racism and his connection to the Vietnam War. And
War is an enemy of the poor.
and the other black leaders, the NAACP and all of them said, you should stick to civil rights, blah, 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 blah. And the unfortunate thing is since the assassinations of Dr. King and Malcolm and a whole host of people and the destruction of radical thought and radical institutions in the Black community, we've developed within our community people who don't have a clue, don't even have a clue about what Dr. King was talking about. There are people who think that Dr. King never said anything about Africa. Mm-hmm. Dr. King was at the independence of Ghana. Dr. King talked about Africa quite a bit. And when we were talking about ideology and what have you, I really want to make a point, because there's one school of thought that nothing is ever radical enough. No film is ever Black enough. And Lenin has an essay that I would encourage everybody to read. By the way, I tend to study people as we used to say, it ain't Mr. Say, but it's Mr. Do. I tend to study people who do something. So I will not criticize the Panthers. But for those people who nothing is ever good enough for, Lenin has a pamphlet called Left-Wing Communism and Infantile Disorder. Mm. And I think that if you're serious about struggle, you'll read that.
Left-wing communism and
infantile disorder.
Infantile disorder. Tom, why am I just now hearing this from you? I
think I've mentioned it before.
Okay.
I don't want to sound like what I am.
I was gonna say, brother, all these years that I've been listening to you, and I'm saying, and you just now hipping me to this. Okay, well, we'll talk about it tomorrow because I'm gonna read it tonight. So, why do you say that left-wing communism and infantile disorder why do you say the audience should read it?
Well, Lenin talks about the definition in this essay about what is the revolutionary vanguard party.
Okay.
And then he says, if you do this, if you do that, if you do this, if you do all these things, you're only correct in doing those things if the masses understand what you're doing and what you're saying.
Okay.
And so I once saw a discussion between two of my brilliant comrades. One was Bob Rhodes.
Oh.
And the other one is still with us, so I'm not going to say anything. But they were having a discussion, and Bob asked the other person to read. And the person read, the vanguard party is the party that does this, that does this, that does this. And then there's a comma. And most people stop at the comma, mm-hmm. because in between the comma and the period, it says, you are correct, provided that the masses understand that you're correct by doing so. If the masses don't understand, it doesn't matter what you're saying or doing.
And for folks who don't know, Bob Rhodes, folks, Tom introduced me to Bob Rhodes, and I brought him on the show. And the first time I had him on my radio show, it was over the telephone. And I realized after saying, and ladies and gentlemen, my guest, Bob Rhodes, I realized right after I said that, I had no business talking to this man, because Bob Rhodes was so damn smart, I couldn't interview him. So going forward, I said to Tom, any other time I have him on, I need to have him sitting in front of me in studio. I have to have him in front of me in studio. And Tom, I need to have you in studio sitting next to him because I couldn't handle it.
He's without a doubt the smartest person that I ever met. Now, I'm not saying that there were smarter people than him. I'm saying I never met them. I used to tell Leon, the general manager of WPFW, we'd be in a meeting and there'd be white people in the meeting. And Leon would get a little nervous. And I used to have to say to him, I said, Leon, there are some white people who are smarter than you and me, but they ain't in this room. So I'm not saying that Bob Rhodes was the smartest person in the world. I'm only saying that he's the smartest person that I ever met.
Whoo, man, that dude, he wasn't deep. He was subterranean. And again, folks, I had to have Tom in the interview to referee the conversation because anyway.
I had the privilege of having lunch on a regular basis with Jack Odell, who J. Edgar Hoover said was the most dangerous man in America, and Bob Rhodes. And it was like Connie Hawkins or Oscar Robinson, you know. And they would be discussing things, and it was like each one was taking the other one to another level.
Bob spelled his name Rhodes.
D-E-S, right.
O.L. Griffin, Bob, Robert Rhodes, Dr. Robert Rhodes. And folks, because Tom, you just said you had lunch with Bob and Jack Odell. And folks, Tom introduced me to Jack Odell. And when I was looking off to my left, your right, I was trying to find Jack's book,
Climbing Jacob's
Ladder it's up here somewhere on my bookcase. And the reason that I am saying to you all that Tom introduced me to Robert Rhodes, Tom introduced me to Jack Odell, and I was able to develop a very good friendship with Jack Odell. Thank you to Tom, is to show you how generous Tom is with his contacts, with his knowledge, because usually in this business, when you develop those types of contacts, you try to keep them to yourself because that's what kind of gives you your unique or individual moniker or stamp and your access to that brilliance you don't want to share because you want that to be your access to that brilliance. Tom said to me, look, Wilmer, I got some folks you got to talk to. And Tom's the one that introduced me to Dr. Gerald Horn. He's the one that introduced me to Dr. Tony Montero. Tom introduced me to Bob Rhodes. That's why I always sing the praises of Brother Tom Porter.
Well, you know, in the 60s, we used to have a saying that if you knew something and didn't share it, that was the imperialism of knowledge. And that could get you in those days, maybe a whipping, you know. But you know, I've been told before that, you know, you have to be careful in sharing your ideas because people will steal your ideas. Well, what I know is other people took the time to teach me something, to pass it on to me, Jack Odell and Bob Rhodes. And I've learned stuff from Wilma. I've learned stuff from my greatest school was the 3 years that I spent working in the Cincinnati post office at night, going to the University of Cincinnati during the day. And there were so many brilliant men and women in the post office who had gone to college and had majored in all kinds of things and couldn't get jobs. And so they were in the post office. They called the post office the graveyard of Black ambition. Mm-hmm. But there were so many authorities in the post office. I learned about the Peking Review by a guy who worked in the post office. So I never worry about anybody stealing my ideas. I'll tell you what I read. I'll tell you the books that I read because I think every day. So even if you were trying to steal my ideas, you just had yesterday's idea.
You're a day late. Well, again, folks, you see why I love this brother dearly, and why I say all the time that listening to his show, Morning Conversations with Tom Porter, and this is not hyperbole. I started to gain confidence in my thought process when I started calling in to Tom Porter's show and expressing my ideas. And if I was right, Tom would validate it. If I was wrong, he would tell me to go read something else. And so I've always tried to pattern, if not mimic, whether it's my Sirius XM show, Inside the Issues, or whether it's this podcast, Connecting the Dots. Tom is who I have always tried to pay tribute to by doing the best job I could do in bringing you the information that I bring you. It's just a follow-on to Morning Conversations with Tom Porter. Tom, looking, if you can you give me a couple more minutes?
Sure.
Okay, it's because the whole process, the whole idea of this conversation was supposed to be beyond Burkina Faso. So as we look at the alliance of Sahel states as a confederation between Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, and we look at Colonel Assimi Goïta of Mali, we look at Ibrahim Traoré of Niger, and Ibrahim Traoré. Folks focus on Traoré, but don't pay as much attention to Goïta and Traoré. And so talk about how, and you mentioned this at the beginning, but Burkina Faso has become the powder keg that is igniting the continent. And you've got Trinidad and Tobago, you've got Jamaica that are supporting Traoré. I mean, you talked about this before, but West African countries are leaving ECOWAS and turning to Traoré.
You know, the seeds, you know, the seeds of revolution, the seeds of resistance, even among Black people in this country. I used to say they can't drain this swamp because it's too wide and it's too deep. Mm-hmm. There's always going to be a Malcolm. And I mean, I met so many brilliant people. I knew Stokely, not Kwame Ture. I knew Rap Brown, but I knew Willie Ricks, who's now known as Mikasa. And I met so many people who were in the struggle in the 60s, and they were just ordinary people from Louisiana, from Illinois. I mean, I met, there was a guy from Louisiana. His name was Top Cat. I never knew what his name really was, but he was a very, very progressive brother. Probably one of the significant thinkers coming out of the movement, and I'm the making of a Black revolution. Mm-hmm. What's his name?
Oh,
he was a former teacher out of Chicago, James Foreman.
Okay,
James Foreman,
the math teacher.
No, that's Bob Moses.
Okay, gotcha.
Bob Moses. But there was a story that James was in, I think it was North Carolina, and a policeman told him not to put his hand on that car. And James Foreman put his hand on the car. He was really, his book, The Making of a Black Revolution, is one of the best books to come out of the 60s. James Foreman. So, and these are people who did things. These are people who were bright and brilliant, but went south. I mean, there are people say, I'm not going to let anybody.
Well,
I'm not going to let
your shirt on.
I'm not going to let anybody hit me. I'm not turning the other cheek. Nobody liked that, but that's where the movement was. You can't get people to fight back unless you take them through certain stages.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know anybody who was born a revolutionary. I know people who say they are, but I don't know anybody. I mean, I participated in the nonviolent sit-ins. I participated in that, but I also participated in the Black Power when we realized that we did not have power. Now, the previous caller, said that we couldn't have power, but we could exercise our power through resistance, and we did. We armed ourselves and we fought back. But what we realized that unless we had the power, and not just the power to resist, but the power to define who you were, whether or not you were Negro, colored, or Black, and what did that mean? Those are serious discussions, and so the seeds of revolution are all over Africa. You go to any country in Africa, if you go to the right place, you can have somebody that's talking the talk.
Mm-hmm.
You can find some group that's meeting. The situation out in Ohio, how did these people get together so quickly? When the fascists hung their fascist flag, all of a sudden brothers showed up, armed to the teeth, organized.
Mm-hmm.
The police had to protect the. So they must have had some discussions. It didn't come out the air.
There was a situation in Mississippi, and I don't know the name of the town, but it was all on Facebook. There was a group of young sisters in this small town in Mississippi. Some members of the Klan decided, this was recently, decided they were going to roll in and challenge these sisters. And one of them got on the phone and made a phone call. And in 10 minutes, brothers locked and loaded and ready to throw down, ran the Klan out of town. And then the story became, well, why were these Black men threatening violence? And they interviewed one of the brothers that was participating. He said, you're asking the wrong person the wrong question. He said, you should never be asking me, why am I in my town defending my sisters? He said, you need to be asking them what made them think they could come in here and not be challenged.
Yep. Well, I think that's the answer to the brother's question, about power. There are different levels and stages of power, but power is real, and you need power, and what they're exercising in West Africa is the power to define themselves, the power to defend themselves, the power, as Malcolm would say, to have freedom, justice, and equality on this planet. That's what they're exercising. Mm-hmm. And that's what we exercised in the 60s. And I still exercise my rights. I still, whether I'm in the supermarket or someplace else, because there's some people who've gotten bold out here. And I'm a little person. I got a little fat, but I've never been a tall person, and I've never been a violent person. But I recognize and understand philosophically and practically that you have to be ready to defend yourself should that time come.
Kevin Baptist, thank you for that $10 super sticker. He says, y'all just keep talking, please. And Jonathan Soul, these are great conversations in tradition of Tony Brown, Dr. Calvin Rolark, Bob Law, and so on.
Yeah, Bob Law is a good friend of mine, and I knew Calvin Rolark, but Bob Law, we have a relationship between our children, so we're very close. And but Bob Law used to say, if we had a discussion like we had today, he would end by saying, and therefore. Y'all have said all of this. Now, and therefore, what y'all gonna do?
Man. So let me see here. As Western powers have plotted and neighboring states stayed silent after the most recent failed coup, talking about other states that have, or countries that have supported Burkina Faso, Morocco stepped forward with action. King Mohammed VI opened Morocco's ports to the Alliance of Sahel nations, giving them an economic lifeline. And this in contrast to ECOWAS's threat when Niger was throwing France out, calling on ECOWAS nations to go in and defend France in Niger. Tom, to your point, this is revolution. And, I was saying a while back, talking about there are points in history where you look back at the time and say, wow, that was a defining moment. And there are other instances where you look around what's going on around you and you say, I'm in that moment now. And we are in the moment.
And it's coming from the streets. One of the things I used to say, you can't win nothing in the streets that you haven't won in the streets. Mm-hmm. And Traore could not be doing what he's doing if he did not have the backing of the masses. And that it is not normal and natural to not eat, to watch your children go hungry. It is not normal and natural to be a slave or a servant. That is not a natural state of a human being. Freedom is the natural state of a human being. And so you have these young people who are growing up, and it will begin to happen here. There was an oh hell no moment with George Floyd. When people saw that, they said, oh hell no, it's too much, it's gone too far. That was an oh hell no moment. And we're having an embryonic form of oh hell no in this country right now, as the person on Pennsylvania Avenue is doing everything that he can with his cronies to undermine the consciousness of Black people, the reality of Black people, and anything that suggests that Black people are anything other than slaves or whatever they want to call. And the discussion in the Black community is, oh, hell no. No, we're not going to stand for this. And it's not happening with the Raphael Warren Act. It's not happening with Hakeem Jeffries or Cory Booker. It's happening in the streets, in conversations in the supermarket, in bars, even in churches, that people are saying, oh, hell no, we're not going back to that. More people are reading and are discussing. These discussions are going on all over our community right now. And on social media and telephone calls and little internal things that we have with 10 friends, and we sharing information and knowledge and what have you. So it is a moment in time when Black people, because they're under attack, and but more than that, the thought of Africa as the motherland is more alive now than it has been since Garvey and Du Bois. I have a daughter who, when I bought some land in Ghana, they thought I was crazy. And now she's talking about moving to Ghana. So, and I know people right here in DC and across the country have already moved to Ghana and other places. Mm-hmm. They're not just moving to Ghana. Ghana seems to be a lightning rod, but I know people in Tanzania people in Senegal, people in Panama.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when it was clear that Hitler meant what he said about the Jews,
Mm-hmm.
there were some Jews who left.
Mm-hmm.
As a matter of fact, Bob Rhodes went to Talladega. Talladega is a small black college in Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened, a lot of the left-wing intellectuals who fled Hitler ended up on black campuses teaching. On a lot of black campuses teaching.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a story about Einstein lecturing at Lincoln University.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but I'm saying that there was no Israel for Jews to flee to at that time. So that's why you have Jews who are throughout the world, in Latin and Central America, in Africa. The place where I stayed in South Africa when I was there for the inauguration was called Jewville.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm saying that the question about where do we go, Dizzy had a tune and he used to say, I'm digressing now, we're never going back to Georgia. I'm never going back to Georgia. And years later, if you listen to John Coltrane's Africa, he answers the question. Dum, 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 dum. That's Africa. If we ain't going back to Georgia, where are we going? Check that out, Africa Brass by Coltrane.
Right.
So anyway.
Folks, these are how the conversations go. when you're blessed to be able to spend an hour or two in the presence of Tom Porter. So Tom, what are we to do?
As the late Bernie Reagan would say, we're gonna stand.
You know, I'm so glad that Melody was able to pull up that clip of Warnock, because again, as much as important as it was to hear that Palestinian sister ask the question or make the statement, make it make sense. It was to me as important for this audience to see how clueless Warnock's audience was. Nobody in that whole church stood up and said, she's right. Not one person stood up and said, she's right. Nobody. That woman deserved a standing ovation. But because those folks were so flippin' clueless on not only the issue, but the relationship between what's being done to Palestinians and what is and is next on the plate for us, if they understood that connection, they would have erupted, and Warnock would have known he was on the wrong side of history.
Oh, you're absolutely right. But that's because our movement has been systematically undermined and been replaced. I call it the negation of the negation, which is fundamental law of dialectics. Went Marcellus, Barack Obama, Kamala Harris, and all these people we've been talking about, they are the negation. Their job was when Went Marcellus and his crew came on, they started putting down everybody that had gone before and criticizing everybody and what have you. You know, their job was to negate the Coltrane, the Mingus, and all of that. And Barack Obama was to negate at the political level the movement that Jesse Jackson had inherited and ran in 1984 when he was number 3 with all of the trickery that they did. When Jesse announced that he was running in the DC Convention Center, the JDL, the Jewish Defense League, interrupted that. And they harassed us. There was Jesse, myself, and Florence Tate, who were traveling together in '84 in the early days of the campaign when Jesse didn't have protection. The JDL was harassing us every place we went, and it was Minister Louis Farrakhan and the FOI from the Nation of Islam provided us with protection until Jesse got Secret Service. But Jesse tapped into a page from Dr. King's The Poor People's Campaign. And I remember once we were in New Hampshire and they said there were no poor people in New Hampshire. And we announced that we were giving out free food in the campaign headquarters in New Hampshire. And the line was around the corner with white people who wanted some food. And so Obama came along. Nobody knows where he really came from. He was part of the negation. And the responsibility of this generation is to negate the negation. In algebra, a minus and a plus equals a minus. But a minus, to negate the negation, is to affirm something at a higher level. And it is affirmed the struggle led by Dr. King and Malcolm and the whole generation to negate the negation, to negate the Obamas and the Wynton Marsalis and what have you, and to affirm the Coltranes and the Miles, the Melba Listons, and the Dr. Kings and the Malcolm at a higher level. That's what the responsibility of this generation is.
When you mention Melba Liston, folks need to know that don't know, phenomenal composer, arranger, trombonist, phenomenal.
Arranged more music than anybody in the history of the music. Melba Liston.
More than Duke Ellington.
And she arranged music for Duke and for Count Basie and for Motown and for Randy Weston. I mean, I tell all the sisters that y'all really need to do a program on Melba Liston. Yeah. Yeah. I went to visit her shortly before she passed in LA. I didn't even know her. I just called up and asked if I could come love the music. And I flew out to LA and spent a nice afternoon with her. Yeah, she was all down in Jamaica. She was phenomenal. Yeah.
Final question for you, Tom. What should Black people do if they are feeling afraid? Should they move? If they feel angered, what should they do? That very general question, but what are your thoughts on what folks should do?
Well, fear is a normal and natural emotion. I mean, I can remember my own fears. I can remember when Rap Brown was at my bookstore he was going to do a press conference. And it was at the time that the National Guard was in Cincinnati, and they were lined up on a yellow line in front of my bookstore. And Rap was yelling at him out the door. At one point, he said, "You see that knife you got on the end of that gun? I'll cut you so short you'll have to tiptoe to pee." And at the same time he said that, a string of white cops rushed into the bookstore, and one put his gun in my stomach and said, "Don't push me anymore." And I backed all the way up against the wall, and I thought I couldn't do nothing. But I smiled and I said, "I guess if I'm pushing you now, you better shoot." Lucky for me that it was a Black cop who was the highest ranking cop. He came into the bookstore and made all the other cops get out. Now, I was scared, but I was not going to allow him to think that I was afraid.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think there's something that not everybody will do the same thing,
Mm-hmm.
but I think we need to prepare ourselves. We need to share things with each other, with family and what have you. I don't think it's really going to get to that, but I think you always have to be prepared. I think that the real conflict is going to be between those whites who are dissatisfied that they're not getting what they want, and the people who are at the highest level of capitalism, like Warren Buffett and what have you, who already came out against Donald Trump. Not so much that they think he's wrong in what he's saying about people, but he's wrong because he is undermining the very levers of capitalism. And for people like Warren Buffett and Bill Gates, Warren Buffett talked about, having Jay-Z to dinner. So they're basically saying we got everything where it wanted. The Negroes are cool and what have you. They riding on getting all of this and what have you. And you come along and woke them up. And not only that, your economic policy is flawed. So that's how I see it playing out. I think there might be some random attacks on the part of police, but I think that they're going to be backed up. But the most important thing I think now is to be conscious. Is to know where you are, know what time it is. Don't be afraid to talk to people, and encourage your church and the pastor to speak about what's going on. But just to be ready. But I don't really have any fear, but do I think that somebody or somebody's might take a swing at me? Maybe, but I mean, I just try and be alert. I just try and be alert.
To that point, Tom, a couple of things. One is you were talking about the instance in the bookstore. That just made me reflect upon the calls I've gotten over the last couple months from the FBI, and my having lunch with FBI agents asking me about my trips to Iran and my involvement with Press TV. And some folks have said to me, well, Wilmer, you shouldn't be talking about that. Well, yeah, I should, because I need to let everybody know that this is what's going on. And I met with them because they asked me to come to their Baltimore office. And the reason I had lunch with them was because when they said, well, will you come to the Baltimore office? I said, under no circumstances am I walking into any building that has FBI on the front of it. I said, now, if you want to talk to me, if you eat lunch, then let's have lunch and let's sit down and talk. Let's have lunch. So the first time I met with these two folks, and we went through all kind of stuff. And then they called me back a couple weeks later. This time they brought a brother with them, and he got there first. And we started talking and going back and forth. And then the other two came, and about halfway through halfway through the second meeting, the white FBI agent looked at the black FBI agent and said, I told you he was smart. So was I scared? Yeah. I was so scared and concerned that I had my attorney on the ready, letting her know, if you don't hear from me by 2:00, that means I've been arrested by the FBI and you need to spring into action. But can I tell anybody else what to do? No. I just know what I've done. I know what I'm doing. And Tom, to your point, at some point, somebody may decide to take a swing at you, and you be prepared in whatever that means for you. And the final point I'll make is, what if Dr. King had waited for the next Dr. King? Where would we be? So I say that to say, folks, what are you going to do? Because what if Dr. King, when they came to him in Montgomery and asked him to help with the bus boycott, his answer was, no, I'm waiting for Dr. King.
Yeah.
Raven Allen, thank you for your super sticker. It is being part of a socio-economic, political, and military power structure that enables you to demand respect. That is power. Okay.
All right.
Okay. Well, somebody just, wait a minute, said they were, Peggy Parks Miller, I appreciate your courage. Well, I don't know how courageous I was, because I was scared as hell that I was going to be taken out of that restaurant and sent to Guantanamo. But again, final point, Tom, and help me out here. In fact, what I wanted to start this whole thing off with was, when, what should you do? The first thing is, you've got to understand who you are.
Right.
And you have to understand what you're about. And when you understand who you are and what you're about, then you'll know what you need to do based upon who you are. And if you're one who will throw hands, then throw hands. If you're one who will not throw hands, then don't stand up like you will, because you'll get punched in your face. Am I right, Tom?
Yeah, well, at a certain point, that when you're on a certain path, that they're going to always be around you, trying to set you up if possible.
Now, wait a minute. Stop right there. Because, folks, when I first got the call from Kathy Hughes at WOL offering me a show, the first person I called was Tom Porter. The first person I called was Tom and said, Tom, what do I do? And folks, please continue, Tom, because this is what he told me. Go ahead, Tom.
What did I tell you?
You told me a couple of things. You said, first of all, be yourself.
Oh, okay.
You said, because if you can't be successful in this business being yourself, the audience will detect fraud in a heartbeat, and you'll obviously be in the wrong business. And the other thing, you went and told me, be very careful, because they'll always be around you. And I interrupted you while you were making that point. Finish that point, because that's where you went next.
Well, they were always, when the situation happened at WPFW, there were elements in the Pacifica structure that did not want me to be general manager. And they had a guy who I didn't even know he was a guy who volunteered in the news department. I didn't even know, I can't tell you his name. They had him to evaluate me. And he wrote an evaluation that said I was the worst person that he'd ever met in his life. And interesting enough, I moved on and I was working with the National Jazz Service Organization. I got a call one day and I recognized his voice. And he said, I just want you to know that we know where you're at. Now, I wasn't surprised because there was no reason for him to write an evaluation, since I had no relationship with him at all. We didn't work together. I wasn't over the news department. And so I could give you story after story after story, but I not only told you to be yourself, but I probably told you that probably was not the best place for you.
You did tell me that, and and there were a couple of other. Well, we won't get into all that. But
I think we're going to be all right.
Mhm.
I think, but this requires analysis, and analysis is an intellectual exercise, but you don't have to be an intellectual to analyze phenomena. You just have to think
and read.
Right. You just have to think. And I've shared some books. I think Amilcar Cabral's Return to the Source is must reading.
I'm looking because I've got it here on the bookshelf, and whenever somebody mentions a book and I can put my hands on it, I put my hands on it. But C. Eric Williams, how Europe underdeveloped Africa.
That's Walter Rodney.
Walter Rodney. I'm sorry.
I mean, I always got books around me. This is laying here. This is
Other way.
written by Samora Machel,
Mm-hmm.
who led the struggle against the Portuguese in Mozambique. And it's a little book called Sowing the Seeds of Revolution. And I just picked these books up over time.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever, that's interesting. The anti-apartheid movement somewhere on S Street with a phone number. So I got it from somebody. Anyway.
Brother Tom Porter, man, thank you so much as always. Love you greatly, greatly appreciate the time and the patience that you always demonstrate when you interact with me. I greatly, greatly appreciate it.
Oh man, I've enjoyed it. I always enjoy my conversations with you on the radio and off the radio.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that, Tom. And with that, folks, I got to thank Brother Tom Porter for joining me today. Again, Tom, appreciate it. Love you dearly. Thank you, brother.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for listening to the Connecting the Dots podcast with me, Dr. Wilmer Leon. And I got to say, we're always asking you to contribute. And what transpired today is a great example of why your financial support is mandatory, because somebody, I don't have it on the screen in front of me, asked about the Panthers trip to China, and Tom said he thought that it happened. I said I thought that it happened, but my brilliant producer Melody Graves went and did the research and sent me the note with the answer to the question. But Melody doesn't do this for free, and I need y'all's financial support so that we can contribute to continue to support each other. When I made reference to the Warnock video, I didn't have to ask Melody to do it. She just went and pulled it up and sent me a message saying, I got the video. Let me know when you want me to play it. But folks, that's why I have a producer, because I'm not smart enough to do this by myself. There are those that can. I ain't one of them. And again, for as much as you all love, thank you, Wilmer and Tom, for listening to my insanity today, Cherie. Well, we always love you. But folks, you got to inspect what you expect, and you got to pay for what you want. That's why I always tell you, we do this for you, but we can't do this without you. So to those of you that are listening on other platforms, thank you. But please go to the YouTube platform and subscribe to the show. And, she doesn't like it when I do this, but sometimes you got to give people their credit, even though when they don't want you to. Melody Graves is a brilliant sister, and this show would not be what it is without her. And she does this because she believes in the project. One Pretty Boy 11, thank you for that $2.99 super sticker. Greatly appreciate that. We've set up a monthly contribution process where you can contribute to this effort for $4.99 a month. And if 1,000 of you did that, we'd be really on the way to being cool. We're trying to get to 10,000. We've got, what is it, Mel? 7,000 subscribers, and we're trying to get to 10. Peggy Parks, thank you for that $3. That matters. That, Peggy, thank you. Again, that's a super duper mocha choca whip with little foam and some cinnamon. And Cherie, thank you for your $5. Wandy, thank you for your $4.99. Folks, thank you. That Kevin Baptiste, brother, you always come through. Thank you. So with that, folks, that's enough of my soapboxing and begging for the day. But we really appreciate it. We really need it, because that's how we are able to stay here and do what we do. Tomorrow, we're going to also be talking about what's going on in Burkina Faso with the sister who I'm drawing a blank on her name, that has opened up to Thomas Sankara NM Richardson is going to join us from Burkina Faso, because she has set up 2 Thomas Sankara centers in Burkina Faso. NM Richardson is going to join us from Burkina Faso. And folks, that's why we need your support, so we can keep doing what we do. Follow, subscribe, leave a review, share the show, follow us on social media. All the links are below. And remember that this is where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge. Talk without analysis is just chatter, and we don't chatter here on Connecting the Dots. Why? Because it's rhetoric free. See y'all tomorrow. NM Richardson's going to join us. I'm Dr. Wilmer Leon. Have a wonderful remainder of the rest of your day. Peace. I'm out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.